You are listening to the weekly Dartscast. 1 hour 90.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. I'm Alex Moss, and joining me as always, my co-host, he is the Darts statistician, 1/3 of the Tuesday Night Flight Spring Champions, and the birthday boy as well. What a start to your birthday, getting to chat with me, but I'm sure it's going to get better after this. Burton, DeWitt, how are you doing?
Yeah, I think, as you said, hopefully it does get better. But now I'm doing all right. How are you, Alex?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thank you. Episode 307. I don't think it's an understatement to say that 99% of those episodes I've been in Suffolk when we've recorded, but there'll be a new location, a new studio for me to record in as of next week. We'll talk about that a bit more next week. But before then, we have got lots to bring you on this week's show. The US Darts Masters returns this week. We've got two of the North American qualifiers that are going to be joining us, Alex Spellman and Jake Macmillan. They're going to be stopping by. We've got your listener questions to answer. We'll be touching on that event at Madison Square Garden. There's even a Rob Cross appreciation minute, but we're going to start with a look back at Premier League finals night, going back to Thursday last week, and Michael van Gerwen setting a new record for the most Premier League titles, winning his 7th at the O2, beating Gerwyn Price 11-5 in the final. But what does this win mean for MVG's legacy?
Well, it now means that for one of the big three events, if you take the World Championships, the World Match Play, and the Premier League as the Triple Crown, even though the Premier League's not a ranking event, it's the first one that MVG now has the most titles in. Obviously, he was never going to catch Phil Taylor for either the World Match Play or the World Championships. 16's a bit beyond even him, even when he was at his best, because he would have been needed to maintain that level of dominance probably for 2 decades, because even at his best, he was only winning those events every other year or 3 out of every 5 years. So he was going to have to keep up that level for a very long time as the game got deeper, as the game developed more players who were able to beat him even when he was playing well. But the Premier League title total was always in reach. It was just the 6 to equal Phil Taylor, 7 to move past him. And the fact that you can afford an off night, you can afford multiple off nights, the way the Premier League goes on, it even more fit his style, because he could focus on just making sure he brings his game enough times and then one night for 2 matches each year. And that's what it is to take the Premier League. When you're a player as good as MVG, you should make the playoffs every year. Yes, there was the 1 year he missed when he really, really struggled. But that year aside, he's been to the playoffs every single time. He's been to the final all but twice, and that was the other year he was struggling. He's topped the league stage all but 3 times in his now 11 years in the Premier League. He's been the dominant player, and he's come out on finals night now 7 times with the title. Does it really add to his legacy? I don't think so. His legacy is already set as one of the 2, maybe 3 best players of all time. I think he is one of the 2 best of all time. Someone might come up that equals him in the next 10, 15 years. And maybe in retrospect, we could look back and run the numbers and, this one Premier League might be what keeps him second ahead of Michael Smith or ahead of Josh Rock or Luke Humphreys or someone we haven't even heard of yet. Dylan Slevin, who knows? There's still plenty of time for one of those players to emerge. I don't think this will be the event that makes a difference. But in terms of the targets he has set himself, this was certainly one of them. And now he has caught Phil Taylor in one of those. World Championships, he's always said the goal has been Raymond van Barneveld's 5. When he hits 5, we'll see if he shifts from that. World Match Play, he hasn't set a number, but, considering he also went half a decade without winning it, I think just winning it again was a big enough target last year. Probably, though, a similar number, 5 or 6. At least get maybe long-term within half of Phil Taylor's totals. But to have caught him in one, I think that's the key thing here. And to do it the way he did it. Yeah, he let Michael Smith back into the match in the semifinals, but he was the best player from the first start. And he never let Gerwyn Price, who's been the best player all season, in with much of a chance. He took it to him in the first session, and he pulled away, and he never let Gezi catch up and averaged 105 MVG of old. To do it that way, I think adds a little bit to it, because it shows that on his night, he is still the player to beat. and his night can come a lot more than it has the last few years.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And when I was looking at this question, I was going down a similar route, really, when you're looking at the GOAT debate. And Burton and I, we have our personal favourites. But if we put that bias to one side, I think for anyone, Michael Van Gerwen and Phil Taylor as their top two. If you put anyone else in there, I don't think anyone would. I know some people will have that order in a different way. They'll have Van Gerwen 1, Taylor 2, and Taylor 1, Van Gerwen 2. But I think 99.9% of people have those two at the top. And as you say, when you're comparing records, you're looking at titles, events that they've won, the big events, and the record that Phil Taylor has, the world titles, the world match play titles. They're records that you can't see Michael Van Gerwen or, in fact, any player matching or beating there. I think they are going to stand the test of time. But when you look at the Premier League, which is the biggest non-ranking event there is in the game, and if you ask players involved, a lot of them will say it is the number 3, maybe even the number 2 in terms of stature and prestige. Well, Michael Van Gerwen, he has now got that record. He's got 7 titles, passing Phil Taylor on 6. I think for me, what makes it more impressive as well is that he's done it having played in less Premier Leagues. Phil Taylor played in 13. Van Gerwen, he's only played in 11. So for me, that shows you a lot more about what he's been able to achieve in the last decade or so. And of those 7 titles as well, it's got to be said, some have been more impressive. I think this finals night is one of the most impressive. I mean, it's going to be hard to top that 2018 final against Michael Smith when he averaged 112. But there's been some times where he has had a few scares. You go back a year before that, 2017, the 6-match darts from Peter Wright in the final. And even last year, Joe Cullen had a dart to win the final as well. But he did come into last week's playoffs, Michael Van Gerwen, and hardly anyone was backing him to win it. I think ourselves, we covered Price and Smith. Those were our picks to win it. And at the start of the night, Van Gerwen was the joint second favourite. In some places, he was the third favourite with the bookmakers. Gerwyn Price, having topped the table by quite a margin in the end, he was the favourite going into it. And we'll come on to talk about Gerwyn Price in a moment a bit more. But the way he brushed aside Johnny Clayton in that semi-final, many people would have fancied him to go on and win the title against whoever it was going to be in the final. But credit to Michael Van Gerwen, and he said it himself, he peaked at the right time. He talks about the right shots at the right times. Well, in a tournament which, as you say, goes on for 16, 17 weeks, it's about peaking at the right time. And he certainly did that on finals night. And the semi-final against Michael Smith finished up with a 101 average, but 10 legs into that game, 7-3 up, he was averaging 108. And it just goes to show the powers of recovery that MVG has. He missed those 2-match darts. Smith then takes out that 1-2-3 on the ball. The crowd are behind him as well, the O2 crowd want to see the English player win the game. He responds, though, 2 visits with 2 big trebles, and he really builds up a big lead in that leg to get over the line and win it 10-8. And then in the final, the 170, the 128 finishes early on against Fro really did hurt Gerwyn Price, and that helped him again open up that big lead in the final and win it 11-5 and go on to become the most successful player in the history of the Premier League. And that is going to be, when we look back at Michael Van Gerwen's career, high up on that list of achievements that he's had.
But let's talk for a minute about the man he beat in the finals. Gerwyn Price topped the table during the league phase of the Premier League, but fell short in the final and is now winless in 5 career televised finals against Michael Van Gerwen. How tough do you think this defeat will be for Price to take?
Yeah, I mean, looking at his reaction on stage, and you kind of expect it from a player that's just lost a major final, but you could tell straight away there was no hiding how disappointed Gerwyn Price was to lose that final. And for me, I was thinking about Gerwyn Price after this final, and it gave me a lot of similar signs, similar vibes to the World Match Play last year. And again, it was an MVG Price final to decide the champion, with MVG coming out on top. And that week in Blackpool, we'd seen Gerwyn Price throw that 9-darter going into the final. He was already guaranteed to go back to world number 1. He was into a match play final for the first time. And yeah, it had all the hallmarks of being a perfect week for him, going on to win the title. But as I say, loses out in that final to MVG. And again, heading into the Premier League final, he was fancied to win the title. He'd had an impressive campaign in the lead up, topping the table after 16 weeks. But also earlier that night, I touched on it, beating Johnny Clayton in the semi-finals, 10-2 with 107 average. And it's one of the highest averages we've seen in a game on a finals night in the Premier League. But in the end, it was the same outcome. Michael van Gerwen was the winner in the final. And you look at the stats on paper, 99.5 average, over 40% on the doubles. It's a good performance. It's not to be sniffed at, but losing 11-5, it's just a fairly one-sided final. And I was looking back at it, and I mentioned some of those big finishes that MVG pulled out, the 170 to break in 12 darts, that put him 4-2 up. Price was sat on 46. In that instance, you've just got to hold your hands up and say, fair play. That's an incredible finish to pull out in that moment and in that final. And again, another 12 dart up to break, the 128. Price had just missed a ball for a 167. So 2 back-to-back 12 darts against you on your own throw is world class. And I was looking 10 legs into it, 7-3 up. Michael van Gerwen was. Price was averaging 115 on his own throw, but against the throw. And I think this is where the problem was for him in the final. He wasn't really giving anything back. He was averaging under 88 at the halfway point after 10 legs of the final, and he hadn't even carved out one dart at a double against the throw. And okay, after the interval, van Gerwen missed a few chances and Price was able to get one of those breaks back, but wasn't able to build on it. And the final stats in the end, Price on throw was averaging 111, against throw 88. And in these games, in these major finals, against someone playing as well as Michael van Gerwen did with that 105 average, unfortunately for him, it's just not going to cut it. And I think when he looks back at it, that's where he's going to look and say, I wasn't putting in enough big scores against the van Gerwen throw. I wasn't putting him under enough pressure. And okay, I think there's way more positives for Gerwyn Price to take from this year's Premier League than there is negatives. Before this year, it's been said many times he'd never made the playoffs, and it's a tournament that he wasn't particularly fond of, but he's ticked that off the list. He's got to the playoffs, he's finished top of the table, and you look back through the history books, there's been more players win the playoffs than there has been top the table, which shows you how difficult that is to do. But at the end of the day, the main goal is to win the playoffs, and Price, unfortunately for him, he's fallen short this time round. And now for him, it's going to be about bouncing back, winning something as soon as possible. He's going to get a few chances over these next few weeks, and the sooner he can do that, the sooner he can put the memory of that final disappointment behind him.
Yeah, you said almost exactly what I was going to say. And I'll start with the semifinal. I mean, he was, I want to say brilliant, but he was just Gerwyn Price. We're used to seeing him go out and average close to 110, if not over 110, because that's just what he's been doing all year. A 107 average. Okay, it's a little longer to do it over 12 legs as opposed to a best out of 11 to do it at best out of 19. But that's just what Gerwyn Price has been doing in season 2023. And it showed that on the night he was ready to bring his best stuff, but he just couldn't do it in the final. And you mentioned, especially against the throw. I'm just going to go through the 8 legs against throw, and this is what he was left on after 12 darts. Sometimes he came back. Just listen to what he was left on after 12 darts. That's 4 visits. He was left on 158 in the first leg, 224 in the third, 146, 122, 197. The first 2 sessions, his best was a 122, which is still a triple and a single for the bullseye. That's the best he was able to leave himself after 12 darts in those 5 legs. First leg back from the second break, he left himself on 65. Oh, sorry, there was only 1 break. But from the after the break, when he came back in the 11th leg, he left himself on 65 after 12. That was his best. And he actually didn't close it out the next turn. He ended up taking 5 darts before he earned his only break in 17. And then in 98 and 186 in the 15th leg. He was only left on a 2-darter after 12 darts in 2 of the 8 legs against MVG's throw. That is just terrible at this standard. You would expect to be left under 100 in at least half the legs, if not more. And you need to be trying to be left under 100, especially when you are behind or chasing like he was all day since MVG won the bull. So to not give himself even a real chance on the MVG throw in 6 of the 8 legs, that did him in. And it wasn't like he was invincible on his throw either. A 99 average, it sounds pretty good. But when you're not contesting half the legs and you're giving your opponent a chance in the half you are contesting, it's never going to be enough. And for Gerwyn Price, it was really a disappointing performance because of that. He has been the best player this year. I still think he is the best player in the world right now, but it's not by that much, and he cannot afford a match where he lets the second best player in the world run riot over him. How does he take this defeat? Well, as you said, there's going to be a couple TV events coming up that aren't worth nearly as much, but will put himself in that position to get some of that confidence back ahead of the World Match Play. And the World Match Play is still one of those events he hasn't won. He's been to the finals of every ranking televised event so far. He's been to the finals of almost every televised event. But the World Match Play is one of the ones he hasn't won yet, and it's certainly the biggest one that he hasn't won yet. Winning the World Cup or winning the U.S. Darts Masters ahead of that will get him at least hopefully some reward for what he has thrown so far this year. And if he can do that, maybe he can go back into the World Match Play and be like, I didn't have my night, but I know that in any given match, I am the favorite. I am the best player. And as long as I go in with that mentality, and I go in like I've started all these Premier League nights and averaged 110 first match, there's only one match each night. He needs to take the positives out of this. The semifinal was a huge positive, and it's one that can keep him pushing in the right direction. But if he dwells on the final, if he dwells on the fact that he did not look like even a top 10 player in that final, then I don't know, because he's having a purple patch, a very long purple patch, but it can turn sour very quickly if you don't push on from it.
We'll be back with a Rob Cross Appreciation Minute in a few moments, but first let's hear from our first guest on this week's show. He is the winner of last year's CDC Continental Cup. He's going to be making his debut in the US Darts Masters this week. Here's our chat with Alex Spellman. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the debutantes in the US Darts Masters this week, Alex Spellman. Thanks for the time, Alex. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, and we're talking only a few days away from the US Darts Masters, your debut in the World Series. What are the overriding emotions as we talk now ahead of you making that walk onto the stage at Madison Square Garden? Is it nerves, excitement, a mixture of both?
You know, I'm kind of known for being generally kind of stoic in my approach to the game, not a lot of emotion, and I would have thought at this point I'd start feeling some of the nerves, maybe nerves isn't, but you know, that just that feeling of, you know, it's a big event, you know, you want to play well, you know, you can win if you play well, and I don't know, at the moment I don't really feel much of anything, but I'm sure the second that I walk into the arena, that'll start to, you know, creep in a little bit. So as of right now, I'm nice and good and ready to go, but that may change in about 48 hours.
Well, for yourself, it's been quite a long wait for you, because your spot as one of the qualifiers came via winning that CDC Continental Cup back in October of last year. So what has that long wait been like, waiting for this event to finally come round? You know,
having that long break has actually been really good for me. Around the Continental Cup time last year, I was kind of going through some issues at work, and I didn't know how the outlook of that was going to go. I didn't know if I, you know, was ready to leave or work some stuff out there. And my game kind of took a hit, kind of actually starting around the Continental Cup time. So my standard wasn't as high as some people had seen leading into it. And it wasn't really up until the beginning of April that, you know, I finally left my job. Not left my job for darts, but just was ready to leave and do something else. But ever since then, my game has been on the rise. Had a great momentum builder at Modus. Built on that at Challenge Tour. While the results weren't necessarily there at Challenge Tour, the quality of play was. And then the CDC, believe it was last weekend, had a win. I think all but maybe 2, maybe 3 of my matches were below 90. So the high quality and consistency of play has been a lot better for me the last couple weeks, which is perfect, because this coming weekend is when I'm going to need that quality.
Definitely, and we'll come on to this year in a moment, but no doubt it's going to be a special moment for you and your time playing darts when you do make that walk later this week. But let's rewind to the very start for you in darts. Where did it all begin? How and when did you get introduced to the game?
So I don't know if they have blind draws over in Europe. where you get it's pairs and you get a random partner. But I was going to college in the town where I was born, here in North Carolina where I live. I didn't even really notice the people in the back playing darts, but they were short a person, and I was the only person they could find that was willing to join them. And I can't remember if I got first or second that night, but I know I made the finals and realized I could probably make more money playing my little local tournament than I was working at the grocery store. So I kind of stuck with it for some side cash, and turns out I had a knack for it. And, that was about 2008, I believe. So I guess in total time, I've now been in the game for 15 years, but it wasn't really until the last 2 or 3 that I decided to take it more serious. I was always more of if it was a 2-hour drive, I'd go play, but I wasn't really trying to travel around the country and chase ranking points or anything like that.
Well, in terms of a sporting background, then you said you got into darts when you were at college. Was there any other sports you were involved in at the time or before then?
So in high school, I did baseball and basketball. I did some cross-country running, but I only did that to get in shape for basketball. But baseball was always, I was a pitcher. I played pretty much every position, but it was primarily a pitcher. And basketball, my skill set was shooting. So I guess that translates over into darts, whether it's shooting a basketball into a hoop or pitching and trying to hit a spot, it's darts. It all translates. I didn't want to do that in college. I had a couple offers for some smaller schools to play either baseball or basketball, but it was the choice of, do I do the sports, but then you kind of lose out on the college experience, because a lot of, I don't know how they do it over there, but over here, it was, if you're a student athlete, they wouldn't allow us to work. You had a curfew, all that kind of stuff. I don't drink, so I didn't have to worry about missing out on that part of the college lifestyle. But I just decided it was better for me to just do those things for fun and enjoy my time in school. And I'm glad I did, because otherwise I wouldn't have met my wife, and I may have never gotten into the game of darts. So I feel like it worked out for me making that decision. Yeah,
definitely worked out well. And getting back to the darts then, 2015, we see the CDC founded. It brings a professional steel tip tour to North America, if you like. And you mentioned there, to begin with, you weren't travelling beyond 2 hours. So when did you start to get involved in those events? Was it more the local ones to you that you started playing in?
Around the time, the first year, I was actually a tour card holder for the CDC. I followed darts. Even though I didn't travel to play in the big events, I still kind of followed what other people were doing. But when there was a professional thing coming up, I always knew what my potential was, and I also knew that you can't really reach that potential just by working on like your mechanics and form and all that stuff at home. You have to get match experience against quality players and top level, and you can't get that without going. So for the first year and a half of the CDC, I went to every event, but some work scheduling got in the way, and it kind of disallowed me from playing pretty much up until around COVID time. So I took quite a long break, worked on my game, and then now I'm taking advantage of, what the CDC's grown to be. I supported it that first year knowing that I wasn't going to win, but I wanted it to be there for me when I figured the game out. And I guess that's where we're at now.
Yeah, and you've had some big wins over the last few years in the CDC. One of them, the shootout in 2021. You beat a tour card holder at the time, Danny Baggish, in the final. What did that win mean to you, one of those first big titles that you were able to pick up?
A couple things. Danny was, a tour card holder at the time, so obviously being able to compete with and beat someone on the tour makes you feel like maybe you could do it too. But I have a lot of pride in the quality of play. I tell people all the time that I focus more on the quality of my play than the result of it. If I can hold a 95 average, I'm going to be competitive in every single match I play. I may not win every match I play, but I'm going to be competitive, and that's all I can really ask for at the moment. But I believe in that match. I think it's a double in, double out event over 6 legs. I think I shot somewhere around a 92, 93, which is, it's tough to do in a double in, double out event. But I want to say, I think it was my first CDC win, even though it wasn't a main tour stop. it was still my first CDC win, and you know, that first step in the momentum of, you know, building your game.
And another win that we've got to mention as well, I know we're coming on to this week, Madison Square Garden on the stage live on TV, but you've had some experiences playing in front of the cameras already, and one of them last year, the ESPN Ball Shooter Invitational, a soft tip event that you won. Talk to us about that win.
You know, the off camera was really difficult for different reasons. You have some of the best players, you know, in the country there. Soft tip is a bit of an equalizer with the targets being larger, so it's harder to win in some ways because everybody can hit big. But you know, going onto the TV, it was weird. I've never been a person that's been afraid to be in front of crowds, you know, like public speaking or anything like that. So being on TV, it didn't bother me, and it's not too dissimilar from doing a lot of the live streaming that we do, like during COVID and even now still through some online leagues. You know, it's being broadcast out there. Maybe, you know, there's not millions of people watching, but there's still a decent number. So it didn't feel that much different. I was super comfortable, but the second I stepped at the line for the first time, you know, I was super confident, but then you have this thought in your head of, but what if I suck? And then for whatever reason, that thought was like, I just wanted to play good. I wanted to show off the game of darts on ESPN, even though it was soft tip, you know, and I prefer steel and all that, but you still want to market the game. You want to play to the best of your ability, and that caused me to be a little more anxious than I was expecting to be. If I'm nervous or anxious or whatever you want to call it this coming weekend, I feel like it's going to be less about me and the situation and more wanting to play well for all the people that are there supporting me. If I can kind of put that behind me and just focus on the task at hand, then I don't know, then maybe I can make them proud.
Definitely. Well, one thing that we have seen from yourself is that you are able to come back and produce comebacks when defeat looks like it's on the way, and we've got to go back to the Continental Cup, back to the CDC in October, back to steel tip. Right. The final against Doug Baines, 7-3 down in a race to 8. You win 5 legs in a row to win the title. What was it like to pull off a comeback like that, and as it turned out, a spot on the line in that game for the US Darts Masters as well?
You know, it's weird, like the spot in the Masters and even the title itself, in the moment wasn't even really in it wasn't like in my viewpoint, just because I was down 7-3 and I was expecting to lose the match. It's just that it doesn't matter if it's the Continental Cup or any other match. I try to treat every single match the same, no matter what. I'm just trying to win that game, that leg, and then move on to the next one. I'm not trying to think ahead or think of what, because if you know what you're playing for and you think about it too much, it just makes it that much harder to, you know, get over the finish line. But during that match, even though I was down 7-3, I was getting frustrated because my darts felt really good. They just weren't falling for me, and I kind of was. I wasn't emotionally upset or angry or anything like that. It was just a feeling of, okay, maybe this, you know, isn't my day. But a lot of people will kind of see me, talk to myself or, you know, yell at myself a little bit, but it's all coaching. There's no emotion behind it. It's knowing I can do better, and it's me telling myself to do better. And I just kind of stuck with that, you know, through that match and took it one game at a time. I knew my darts felt good, and all of a sudden they started falling for me. I think I went 13-14 to tie it up at 7-7, and you have a lot of confidence going into that last leg. You know your opponent knows that you've just gone on a good run. All the pressure's on them. Just to be in that position to even win the match, I feel like I'm free rolling. I'm playing freely there. All the pressure's on the other guys. So, I don't know. It just comes with confidence in your game, knowing that you can dig out of anything. So if I'm down 5, I don't know I can't remember what the race is. If it's race to 5, race to 6. Well, if I'm down 4-0, I genuinely believe I can come back and win that match 5-4 or whatever, because I've done it before.
Well, that was a great win, and it brings us on to this year, 2023. We're not even halfway through the year yet, but possibly, or it's on course to be the busiest year you've had in darts. And starting off with a first trip to Q School, you got down to the last 8 on one of the days of the final stage. Right. You weren't far off a card on that day, but what were your biggest takeaways from that week at Q School?
That was around that time frame where my darts weren't very good because I kind of had some outside influences and it's hard to play your best if you're not really in the mood to be playing darts. But I still was able to pull out some quality matches. I had some really good ones. Like Guian Van Veen is playing. I think he's the best player pretty much this month as far as like averages are concerned. He's playing at an incredibly high level, and I played a really good match and beat him. And just playing with some of the best and being able to compete with them when you know that you're not quite at your best. Even when I was losing matches, I felt like I brought my B game and I was competitive. If I can bring my A game or my A plus game, I can actually do some damage. So you're walking away from this losing more than you want, but you're building confidence and you're getting hungrier to come back better because you know that next time you're going to be better, and next time that loss is maybe turns into a win. So I've just kind of been taking every experience so far in Europe with that perspective.
Definitely. Well, you've had a few more trips to Europe. You mentioned it, the Challenge Tour. You've already made a semi-final on that this year. The Modus League, you've played in that as well. But I want to touch on as well, you've got the chance to play in a couple of the Players' Championships as well, at a first taste of the Pro Tour. What memories have stuck with you from those few days, being in the same room as a lot of the best in the world?
It was really weird because you think you'd kind of go in there and be a little starstruck, and maybe some would be, but maybe it's because I've seen these guys on TV for a decade or more. You already feel like you kind of know them, and I don't know, it felt incredibly comfortable being for whatever reason, and maybe it's what to expect out of these guys. Like if I go to Q School, I may not have heard of most of these people, so I don't know who's really good, who's maybe kind of good. You don't always know what to expect. If I walk into the room and I feel like I'm warming up on the board with Rob Cross and Ricky Evans, and I think it was Soljevic. I already know what these guys can do, so I'm not I'm not thinking about what they're doing. I'm just thinking about what I'm doing. But I had a really awful weekend in Hildesheim in general. The jet lag hit me really hard that weekend. I felt like I was trying to fall asleep during the Challenge Tour events, but I wasn't going to turn down even if I was awful, I wasn't going to turn down the opportunity to play in the Players' Championship. But I had little moments of confidence building there, where, like I said, I was warming up on a board with Rob Cross and those guys, and Rob makes fun of me because he says that I throw really slow, like molasses, like watching paint dry. Just kind of making fun of me, but then he taps, he just kind of hits me on the shoulder and he's like, well, you hit everything you're shooting at, so I guess it's okay. I was warming up. I think he said that after I had done like 180, 140, 180, 180 while we're practicing and that. But just like little things, just hearing stuff like that from guys at his caliber, it makes you, it makes you feel like you're doing something good. And but everybody was really friendly. Really enjoyed it. I wish I was in a better form when I was there. I feel like if I was able to get another crack the way I'm playing now, which fortunately I will be this weekend, maybe I can do a little better this time.
As you touched on earlier as well, you're currently taking a break from work as well to focus on the darts for a short period at the moment. How difficult a decision was that to make?
It was kind of a mutual decision with my job, so that made it actually a lot easier. So it kind of freed me up pretty much. So I left my job the Friday before I went to Modus, and that's pretty much when my darts started taking back up, because now the stress of having to make that decision was gone. And so it's been stressful, but in a good way, because now you're thinking, like, what do I want to do next? Do I want to stay working in IT? Do I want to, start looking at the dart world more seriously, either as a player or, in some other industry involved with the game? So it's good stress to have, because you have a lot of options and you want to choose the right one for you. But as far as the game itself, now that I can actually focus and enjoy the game and not have to worry about that outside stress, like I said, my game has just been back on the rise. The confidence is there again. So yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to seeing if it continues to get better.
Good to hear. Well, we'll finish up with a look back to this week, and you mentioned a moment ago about you had a bit of friendly banter with Rob Cross on the Pro Tours. He's in the field in New York this week. When we were talking, we don't know who you're going to be playing. Would you like to play Rob, or if you had a choice, is there someone you've got your eye on?
I don't. I mean, I would love to play, the big two guys, arguably one of the best ever, in MVG. You have the reigning world champion. If I can go up there and I can beat the number one in the world, if I'm lucky enough, then, that's going to be an amazing confidence boost. I know it's only one match, but, hey, you beat them once, you can beat them again, right? But honestly, all the players that are coming over are incredible for, different reasons. I haven't really thought about it. I do think a quicker player like a Michael Smith, even though I wouldn't say I'm slow, I'm more like a Peter Wright speed versus a Justin Pipe speed, but someone that they can kind of keep me in rhythm might be best for me. But I don't have any preference at the moment.
We shall see when the draw comes out. And just lastly, not only the US Darts Masters this week, there's also the North American Championship, the winner getting a spot in the Grand Slam, and the World Championship later this year. 3 wins will get you there. It's in all 8 players' sights. So what would that title mean to you?
Oh, it mean a lot, even if just only for the bragging rights for a little bit. But also, the chance to play in the World Championships. These are not necessarily goals for me. I still treat the game as a hobby for now. And it's like playing it like a video game. You play in easy mode, and then once you beat that, then you move on to the next, medium and then hard and expert or whatever. I'm trying to level up and see how far I can push my game. And I accepted the Players Championship spot in Hildesheim, knowing I was playing awful. It was because you may never get that opportunity again. So winning the North American Championship gets me the spot in the worlds, and you never know if you get that opportunity ever again. So it would mean a lot for me just for that experience of being there. But it's going to be really tough. Obviously, you have seasoned guys like Jeff Smith and Matt Campbell, and I consider Matt to be pretty clearly the best North American we have. I know some of the newer names on there, a lot of Europeans won't be familiar with, but another person that could, I don't want to say easily, but it would not be a surprise to me and maybe a lot of people, is Jason Brandon is somebody to look out if he wins the North American Championship, and if he wins the first, one of the first rounds of the Masters, it wouldn't surprise me in the least that he's a little more unknown outside of the United States, but he's always my toughest competition. So I'm kind of hoping I get to play him. I don't want to play him in the first round, but it would be nice to maybe play him a little later, and maybe even in the final. But I don't know. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing how it all unfolds. Alex, it's a pleasure to chat to you. We appreciate the time, and congratulations on what you've achieved in the game so far. And we wish you all the best, not just for this week at New York, but for what else is to come this year as well.
Yep, I appreciate it. Anytime.
Attention all dart enthusiasts, this is ZR, your host from In the Mud Sports, and I have an exciting announcement for you. Are you ready to take your darting experience to the next level? Introducing In the Mud Sports, the premier online darts league for amateurs like yourself. We're not your typical darts league, it's an experience like no other. It's where you can showcase your skills, make new friends, and have an absolute blast. We have a vibrant community where camaraderie is key and darts meets pure enjoyment. Whether you're a singles player or love the excitement of team events, In the Mud Sports has got you covered. We are perfect for amateurs who want to have fun and improve their game along the way. It is your time to shine. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to elevate your darting experience and join 80 plus players from all around the world. Together we'll create unforgettable moments on and off the oche. You can catch all updates about where we are going live next through Twitter and Instagram at In the Mud Sports. See you guys there.
Thanks again to Alex for joining us now, continuing our look back at last week in the world of darts and to the Euro Tour, the European Darts Grand Prix. And it is time for everyone's favourite segment of the show, the Rob Cross Appreciation Minute. Rob Cross ending his long wait for a first European Tour title on Sunday, beating Luke Humphries 8-6 in that winner-takes-all for the England World Cup spot final. What could this win do for Rob's season?
Well, we talked a little bit about Rob Cross recently because, just the week before he won his first Players' Championship event of the season. And actually, we can go a step further. He won his first board in a Players' Championship event of the season, went on to win the title from there. The following day, he won his board again, but he didn't go any further. He lost in the last 16, a terrible performance, averaging 111 in a defeat to Chris Dobie. But I mentioned, Gerwyn Price is in a very long purple patch. Rob Cross seems to be can't call it a long one. It's only been going on for 9 days now, but certainly in his best form of the season. And before that, we talked about it. He had made a Euro Tour final, but he didn't seem himself. Something seemed a little bit off. And maybe taking off the Premier League to focus on the other events just led to him not having the focus that he needed. I don't know. Only he knows. But right as the Premier League season came to an end, or was coming to an end, Rob Cross showed up, and he showed up in a big way. The Players' Championships, he's still 23rd in the averages, but that's certainly going up. He's averaged over 100 in 5 of his last 12 matches. 5 of his last 11 matches in Players' Championship events. He's now won a Euro Tour event, his first one ever, and to do it under the pressure that he did. I'm sure all of our listeners know, but we have to mention it. That was a winner-take-all for a spot in the World Cup squad for England. If he lost the finals, then that would have meant Luke Humphries would have caught him by 500 pounds. One first-round win in a Players' Championship event would have been the difference. If he had managed to beat Ross Montgomery on the 19th of March, then it wouldn't have been up for grabs. But that's how close it would have been. And that was a lot of pressure to play for. And he took the lead fairly early on. Luke came back at him. Luke averaged 104 in that match. Luke statistically was the better player, but Rob Cross barely gave him a look on his throw. He got broken after the early break. After he broke Luke early on, Luke broke him back. But after that, he really didn't give Luke Humphries much of a chance on his throw, and he held serve throughout the match under all that pressure, with the fact that he had lost 7 Euro Tours. We've been saying for some time that he was going to win one of these, and by some time I mean since maybe our 14th episode, when he had already won 2 Players' Championship events in his first season. And he went on to make a final in the Euro Tour, went on to make the European Championship finals that year. And we thought, okay, he's won Players' Championships. He won the world title. The Euro Tour is certainly going to come soon. Well, it didn't. It took a lot of time. It finally has now happened. What does it do for his season? I don't think much. I think Rob Cross knows where his game is. I think Rob Cross knows that he still has it, and he is still one of the players to beat. And part of taking off the Premier League was to make sure that he remained one of those players, to make sure that he defended as much money as he could so that he would stay in the top 10, so that he would stay in the Pro Tour seedings. Winning a Euro Tour, £30,000, that goes a long way to making sure you stay in the Euro Tour seedings. And does a lot towards making sure that you stay in the top 16 as well. It's going to make sure that he's in all those televised events, and he's going to be in as a seed for the World Championships, but for the World Match Play and probably the World Grand Prix as a result as well. And it takes some of that pressure off in the back end of the year to make sure that he keeps himself in that position for 2024. I don't think it does anything specific for his season other than it confirms that he made the right choice skipping the Premier League, or at least calling himself out because of contention, because his goal has always been to win another world title and to win as many of the other ranking majors along the way. The ranking events are Rob Cross's bread and butter, and they're what he wants to be his best for. And, well, it showed that maybe he's made the right choice.
Yeah, it's always good to get a Rob Cross appreciation minute on the show. And just want to point out as well, the last 2 winners of these European Tour events, we had Peter Wright a couple of weeks ago, and he said after he won the title, I'm an old guy just enjoying darts. As long as I enjoy darts, that's the main thing. Fast forward 2 weeks to Rob Cross's title, and he said, anyone would think I'm on a roll. I'm the happiest I've been in my life for a while. I'm enjoying my darts now. So these are 2 former world champions that are following our advice on the show, which is to enjoy the darts, and look where it's taken them. They're winning titles on the European Tour. But no, it was good to see Rob get that monkey off his back, as he called it. He'd been in 7 previous Euro Tour finals, lost all 7 of them, and at the 8th attempt he wins it. And you've got to say this final had the most riding on it, because there was that spot in the England World Cup team alongside the world number 1 Michael Smith, and whoever would have got that spot, they're going to be going into that event thinking, well, I've got the world champion by my side. We've got a real good shot of winning this thing. So there was a lot up for grabs for both the players, and it's a race that we've been talking about for the last couple of months, especially with Luke making all those Euro Tour finals. He's been in 4 now this year, and with the added prize money to the Euro Tour this year, the difference between winning and losing that one game in the final, £18,000 in the end, made all the difference, because, as we said, if Luke would have won the final, he'd have got that debut in the England team this year. But Rob won it, ended that curse on the Euro Tour, wins the title, and he's going to be with Michael Smith in a couple of weeks' time. And I'll come on to Rob in a moment, but I just wanted to give a mention to Luke Humphries as well, because I think he should get a lot of credit for the run that he put together at the weekend. And he spoke after losing the final about how devastated he was to miss out on the World Cup, and he said that no one in the backroom wanted to play for England as much as he did, and that tells you how much qualifying for that tournament meant to him. So with that on the line, and he knew that going into the weekend he had to win the title, to put a run of performances and results together like he did, the win against Chris Dobey where he survived that wobble at the end after missing those match starts. Dobey himself had a chance to win it, but after that, the final day, beating Raymond van Barneveld fairly comfortably 6-2, and then a cracker of a game with Gian van Veen, who averaged 106 himself, but Luke 109 average to win that 1-6-4, then beating one of the best players we've seen on the Euro Tour this year, Damon Heta, 7-5 in the semi-finals, and then in the final finishes with a 104 average, and again, one of the highest losing averages I think we've seen in a Euro Tour final. There's not much more he could have done. So, yeah, I think he deserves a shout-out. But back to Rob Cross, the appreciation minute, grinded out a few results over the weekend when he wasn't at his best, but when it come down to it, the final, 7-6 up, he's just seen Luke miss that bullseye for a 1-6-7 to break, and in that decider he would have had the darts, but he gets a chance, 72 finish, 1 dart at double 18. If he misses, he is likely going to go down to that last leg, and he takes it, gets the double 18, and it's not a huge eye-catching finish like the 170s, the 128s that we've spoken about earlier with MVG in the Premier League. But when you're getting that 1 dart at a double and you hit it, they are just as important. So, yeah, it's a big win for Rob Cross. Not as big as the majors that he's won, the 4-hit wonder. But you look at other players that have won majors and not got off the mark on the Euro Tour. Dimitri van der Berg, Nathan Aspinall, Danny Noppert. These are difficult titles to win. So I think for Rob, it is a monkey off his back. As I said, it's a confidence-boosting win. And, yeah, we'll see if he can go on and maybe call himself a 5-hit wonder before the end of the year.
Missed an opportunity to mention Ko Stompe.
Yes, well, I don't think we're going to see him back on the Euro Tour anytime soon, unfortunately.
Now, darts returns to Madison Square Gardens this week for the U.S. Darts Masters. We spoke about the North American qualifiers last week, but who of the PDC representatives do you tip for the title? And for our listeners, those are, of course, the top 6 in the world, as well as Dimitri van der Berg and Nathan Aspinall. And I guess since we're talking about PDC representatives, I think Jeff Smith, Matt Campbell, and Jules Van Dongen have to get into the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I was just thinking, actually, Ko did win an unofficial Euro Tour before it started, that German Darts Championship. So I don't know if we want to call that a Euro Tour event, but maybe unofficially.
That was a premier title.
Premier title, okay, well, that's even better then. I'm even happier. But back to the question, and yeah, I mean, at the time of recording, we don't know the draw yet, but you look down that list of players, and I think there's a good mix in there. You've got a lot of the players that we've already spoken about on the show that have won titles on stages in the last week. Michael van Gerwen in the Premier League, Rob Cross on the Euro Tour. They're going to be going to New York full of confidence after those wins. And then you've got players that have lost in those finals, Gerwyn Price and Luke Humphries. They're going to be coming into it this week, perhaps a little bit wounded from those defeats. Price, what we spoke about, how he just missed out on winning another major title, and then Luke, the disappointment of missing out on the England World Cup team with that defeat on the Euro Tour. But two players that are going to be wanting to bounce back, and nothing's going to do that more than by winning the title this week. And it is probably one of the biggest World Series events there is. It does get a lot of attention from the PDC and from the media around here. So anyone that goes on to win that title, they will feel like it's quite an important event. And you mentioned a few of the other players there you've thrown into the mix. You got the defending champion Michael Smith, the world number 2 Peter Wright, who's probably got a point to prove again after a disappointing Premier League, and then Dimitri Van den Berg and Nathan Aspinall. And the 8 players, the North American qualifiers, we spoke about them on the show last week, some of those that could potentially pose a threat this week. So it is tough to predict, but I'm going to go with Luke Humphries for this one. I think we're going to see a reaction from him this week. And even though he hasn't won a title yet this year, which is quite surprising considering how well he's played throughout the year, I think he deserves a title from what he's produced so far in 2023. And I think that elusive first title of the season, he'd have loved it to have been last weekend, but I think it's going to come this week at Madison Square Garden. And he's already played in the World Series this year. He's played in those 2 events at the start of the year back in January. So he's done the whole World Series debut thing. This is a new venue for him, but the format playing in the World Series, that's not going to be a new concept for him anymore now. And he's not in the World Cup, which is an event which he was desperate to get into, but I think he's going to put that disappointment behind him in the best way possible, and I think he is going to win the title. I'm not sure who he beats in the final, because if I pick someone and they end up being drawn in the same half, then that's my prediction already off the mark. So I'll stick with just the winner. I'm going to back Cool Hand to add his name to that World Series Roll of Honour this week.
I was thinking we might get through a week without having to make picks. No, I really want to actually fancy one of the North American players to go and win the title, but I think that's just because I want that. I mean, I like the Luke Humphries argument. It's amazing he hasn't won. He's been to 4 Euro Tour finals this year. He made 4 last year. He won all 4. He's made 4 so far this year. He's lost all 4. But he's been probably the best player in the weekend in at least 2 of those 4, if not all 4. He's been right there or thereabouts. He just hasn't got it done. I'm going to go Gezi. I think Gezi's just... he's playing too well, and he has too much confidence to let the Premier League do anything other than motivate him to come and lift the title in New York. It's the biggest city on the world stage. It's the biggest event in that city. And I think Gerwyn Price wants to prove he's the biggest player playing in the biggest event of the biggest city. And therefore, I'm going to go Gerwyn Price to be the winner. But I mean, you can make a case for almost all of these players. I mean, Dimitri Van den Berg won a night recently in the Premier League, but beyond that has really been struggling this year. But the other 7 have all done something recently. I mean, Nathan Aspinall's been inconsistent, but he's played some really good stuff at times. We talked about Luke Humphries. We've talked about Rob Cross. We talked about Gerwyn Price. We've talked about Michael Van Gerwen all on this episode and how good they're playing. Peter Wright won a Euro Tour recently, and Michael Smith is the world number 1 world champ and won 3 consecutive Premier League nights. I think you can make a case for almost all of them except maybe Dimitri Van den Berg. So I guess that means it's going to be Dimitri Van den Berg's title to win.
We shall see. Well, we've got some listener questions to get to in a moment, but let's hear from another player that is going to be playing in the US Darts Masters this week. Another debutant. Here's our chat with Jake Macmillan. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the debutants in the US Darts Masters this week, Jake Macmillan. Thanks for the time, Jake. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Pleasure to be on.
Great to have you on, and we're talking 3 days before you make that walkout at Madison Square Garden for your World Series debut. How are you feeling with just a few days to go now?
I'm pretty excited, a little nervous, but I can't wait to get there and take it all in.
We spoke earlier with another of the North American qualifiers, Alex Spellman, and he qualified back in October, whereas yourself, you came through the qualifiers still less than 2 weeks ago. Would you have preferred more time to prepare, or do you like that you've not had much time to think about it?
Yeah, I think not having much time to think about it has its advantages. It was quite the ride to get there, so I think less time to worry about it. Just get on with it, ready to play.
Well, we'll come on to those qualifiers a bit later, and let's circle back though to the very start for you in darts. How and when did you first discover the game?
as soon as I was able to walk, my dad, my uncle, my grandfather, they had me throwing darts as early as I can remember. I have pictures of me in diapers beside the diaper bag, throwing darts up against the wall and to a dartboard. It's just in my family. It's like in my blood, I guess.
And yourself and your family obviously being from Canada, was darts always the main sport for you, or were you involved in playing in any other sports growing up?
I played a bunch of sports growing up, mainly softball. So I would play darts in the winter, and then during the summer I would stop playing and just play softball. It wasn't up until maybe I was around 18 that I started to take darts a little more serious.
So what has the dart scene been like for you in Ontario over the years, playing the game since you started to take it a bit more seriously? What opportunities have you had to play?
So when I was 18, I was in my first big ranking tournament. It was a lot to take in, a bunch of dart players, and like I said, I was 18 years old, didn't know what to expect. I played decent, and a woman by the name of Marjorie Allardyce, she seen me play, and she looked after the youth scene, and she said she wanted me to play provincials. So I took the plunge into being more competitive, playing the youth darts, and I ended up winning provincials and going to Alberta for the nationals. And it was around that time that I figured, I can actually do this. Then I would play doubles and four-man teams with my dad and my uncle, just all over Ottawa area and stuff like that. Up until last year, I went to the adult provincials. I was one round away from qualifying for the team in that, but I knew I was right there. The game was starting to come along. This year, I ended up winning the whole provincials, which was an achievement among itself. And that was just back in April. And to think just a few months later that I'm going to be playing in Madison Square Garden is it's pretty unbelievable, really.
Definitely. And you mentioned those provincials. I was going to come on to them because even before winning through those qualifiers, it's already been a memorable year for you on the dartboard, winning those provincials. And I think you mentioned on another interview coming through a field of 500 players to win that title. So what did that win mean to you?
Oh, it was massive for the confidence. Ontario has such a large and deep pool of good players. In the top 8, I had to take on Ross Snook, who is pretty well known, and in the semis beating Jim Long, who also will be there at Madison Square Garden, and coming through a nail biter in the final. But just the amount of players and the amount of good players in Ontario, it's quite the feat.
Definitely is. And you've also dipped your toe into the water with the CDC this year as well. You went to their Q school in February. What was the decision behind that? Did you feel that now was the time to try and progress your game on that circuit?
Yeah, I feel I felt like I had the game, and we always go to the Syracuse tournament anyways. Great tournament, and I thought, you know what? I'm there anyways. Let's try the CDC qualifier, see how it goes, and end up making the final. Lost, I think, 5-4 in the final. Great games. I played well all weekend, and that was another boost of confidence. That was just before provincials too, so I think that might have helped progress me along.
Yeah, you mentioned that run to the final of Q School and the weekend of the World Series qualifiers. That was one of your first weekends playing on the CDC tour. So how are you feeling going into that weekend? Not just the qualifiers to play, but you had 3 tour events as well.
Yeah, it was the CDC is something else, I tell you. Walking into the room, starstruck, really. Just everywhere you look, just phenomenal dart players. It's quite incredible just to walk amongst all the guys. My CDC on Friday, the main event, didn't go to plan. I didn't play overly great, but I thought, you know what, it's my first day. It's all a learning experience. Just try and progress through the weekend. Saturday, ran into Danny Baggish second round, had a few darts to go up in a game, and he ended up taking it. So I wasn't going into the U.S. Masters on a high note by any means, but I did stick with it and made a good run to the final, beating some good players along the way. Gavin Nicol, Ryan Vanderwhite, Jacob Taylor, Leonard Gates. It was phenomenal, really, for me. And then I fell apart in the final, but all credit to Jason Brandon. He shot amazing, even though my game was dipped off. He still brought his darts, and it was incredible to watch, really.
Yeah, you mentioned that run to the final of the first qualifier before losing out. Were you able to get much sleep that night before the next day, the second qualifier, knowing that you'd got so close, but also with the Order of Merit, you were in pole position to get a spot?
Yeah, so I didn't get any sleep, to be honest with you. I think I got back to the hotel around 12:31, and then back up again, maybe 7 o'clock. But I was feeling, I got second, so I'm in a good spot now. I just have to make a good run now on Sunday and hope for the best, really.
And looking at that second qualifier, you couldn't have asked for a much tougher draw. You look at Danny Lauby Jr. first up, then Jacob Taylor, Darren Young. That's just to get through the first 3 rounds. So what was your reaction at the start of the day when you've seen the draw come out?
So I was warming up, and they announced that the bracket was open. And so I scroll through, and I see Danny Lauby first, and I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Like, could I not have drawn a more favorable draw my first round? But I played well. I beat Danny, and I went and sat back. I was chatting with a few of the guys. I knew the second round was about to begin, so I figured I'll go and check the next round. And I scroll through and see that it was Jacob Taylor. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's going to be the toughest draws around to get through here today. I did end up coming through that. I played very well against Jacob Taylor. Then third round, Darren Young. So it didn't get any easier. That was quite the battle against Darren Young. He deserved to beat me. He really did. Just missed some doubles. So I was thankful for the chances.
Well, you go out, I think, the last 16 of that second qualifier. What is that time like between then and I think you said as well that when they announced at the end that you've got the spot on the Order of Merit, that was when you found out, but to begin with, you thought that you'd missed out?
Yeah, so at the time I didn't know if I would have just beat Elliott, I would have guaranteed my spot. I wasn't looking at the numbers really, and so he played well. He deserved to beat me, so I went and sat back, was chatting with the lads, really didn't know, I knew whoever finished second, him and I were going to be tied with points, and I didn't want to crunch the numbers to see, leg difference and all this, but I had a bunch of people come up to me when Elliott and JT were in the finals saying, you need a 5-0 or a 5-1 either way, and then you're in. So Elliott went up 2-0, and I thought, okay, Elliott, you might as well make it 5-0. But JT came back, and he won 2 legs in a row. Well, he ended up winning 5 in a row, but it was when it hit 2-2, I figured, I didn't do enough. I'm probably not going to make it now. And so JT ends up winning 5-2, and so I'm just sitting down with the lads, a little bummed because I figured, probably didn't do enough to make it. But, oh well, I was happy with how I played. And maybe 15, 20 minutes later, Peter announces the names. Jason Brandon's qualified, JT's qualified. And then he said my name, and my jaw hit the table, I'm telling you. It was unbelievable.
Good times. And we saw as well on Facebook that you've held a fundraiser to help raise money for you to play on the CDC tour, obviously with the costs of travelling. So now that you've qualified for the US Darts Masters off the back of that, how much has that support helped you, and what does it mean to have repaid that support as well, I guess?
Yeah, the support has been phenomenal. My buddy Andy Brown Carpentry, he's been a big help, big sponsor for me. My friend Norm from Tomasino's Pizza, he has also been incredible. And the fundraiser, just have all my friends and family out, and fellow dart players come support me. You know, it's an incredible feeling that they believe in my darts and my performances. So it feels nice to give back and show them that I have the game to, you know, live up to what they're expecting.
Definitely. And for you, darts isn't a full-time career. What is it you do for work, and what are your aspirations for darts? Would you like to one day make it your career, or are you just going to see how far this run takes you?
I would love to be able to play darts for a living and be able to live off that. That's the dream. I wouldn't be able to ask for more than that. Right now, I still work full-time, Monday to Friday, doing factory work. It's close to home, so it's not too bad. A couple-minute drive, so can't really complain there.
And we saw as well, you've got a new shirt for Madison Square Garden this week. You've ticked that box, but what about the walk-on? Have you picked a song yet you're going to walk out to?
So the new shirt, I actually won't be wearing that one at Madison Square Garden. My buddy had just given it to me. It's a nice shirt, but I'm still going to keep the other two that I have. I'll be wearing those. And no, the walk-on song, I still don't know what I'm going to use. I've been going through music for the last week here, trying to pick a song.
Yeah. An important choice for every dart player. And what about the draw then? Because when we're talking, the draw's not been made yet for the first round, but is there any of those 8 players, any of the top PDC names you'd like to go on that stage and play?
Yeah, so I just seen on Facebook that the draw is being held Thursday, I believe, and I'll be traveling Thursday, so hopefully at some point I'll be able to watch it live. That would be nice. In regards to playing any of the pros, I mean, playing any of those 8 guys is going to be an incredible experience. I look forward to, you know, if it was any one of them. Looking forward to play anyone. Oh man, I mean, playing Van Gerwen, Premier League champ now, that would be incredible. Price always is amazing. Peter, you know, the atmosphere he brings, just every single one of them. It's no matter who I get, it's just I'm going to be shocked, basically.
I don't blame you. And you've also got the North American Championship to play in this weekend. It could be a potentially life-changing weekend if you do go all the way, and with that win gets you into the Grand Slam, the World Championship as well. So how do you try and put all of that to one side and I guess just try and play your own game?
Yeah, so going into this weekend, playing the pro here is a bonus, really. Not that I'm not focused on playing the pro. Obviously, I want to play well against one of those guys, but the main focus is doing well in that North American shoot and winning, because what comes with it is some incredible achievements.
And just lastly, before we let you go, beyond this week, what is the plan for the rest of this year? Have you got any other CDC events that you signed up for? Is there any other events that you've got your eye on as well?
Yeah, so I'll be at all 3 of the other CDC events, July, September, August. I'm hoping to qualify for the Continental Cup. However, it's my first year, and I know they go by a 2-year order of merit through that. So I might not qualify for the Continental Cup. I'm going to try my best to. But for sure, the 3 CDC events are the main focus after this weekend.
Excellent. Well, Jake, it's a pleasure to chat to you. We appreciate you taking out the time, and congratulations on qualifying for the US Darts Masters this week. Wish you all the best for this weekend and what else is to come this year as well.
Thank you. I appreciate having your time too, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks again to Jake for joining us. Now we'll finish up the show with a pair of listener questions. And the first one, I think this is the first time we've had one from Ajit Vasani. Thanks very much for getting in touch. And he wants to know, why isn't there a European Tour event in the UK?
Well, I mean, there was one back in 2013 at Minehead, but I think that kind of got replaced by moving the UK Open from Bolton to Minehead, and suddenly Minehead had 2 televised events. I mean, there could be one in Europe, and part of the reason not to, in the UK, there could be one, and part of the reason not to no longer exists, because now there are so many Euro Tour events, and the sport is growing, and there's now Players' Championship events in Europe as well. You know, there could be an argument for it, but at the same time, most of the televised events are still in the UK. If you look at the Premier League, okay, they have one event, one night in Dublin. They have one night in Rotterdam. They have one night in Berlin. The rest are somewhere in the United Kingdom. That could change in the future. We've asked Matt Porter about it, and it's something that they, are always willing to consider, but it is, an event that Sky puts on, Sky runs, and the logistics of midweek getting something out to Warsaw might not be all that easy to deal with. So most of the nights are going to stay inside the UK until the demand elsewhere outstrips the demand in the UK. But as well, the other televised events, the European Championships might not be in the UK, but even, at least right now, the World Grand Prix moved from Dublin to the UK. So pretty much every other ranking major is somewhere in the United Kingdom. There's a couple of the non-rankings, the World Cup, the World Series finals that are not, and all the World Series events are all around the globe that are not. But the majority of the events and the ranking events are still in the UK. It's only 8 of the 30 Players' Championship events that are not. So I think that's part of the reason why. The market is not necessarily saturated, but there's much more to be gained elsewhere. And there's other things in the UK that the PDC puts on to the point that there's not the need for it. That said, it is the PDC Europe, a technically separate organization that runs these events. They obviously work very closely with the PDC, but they're the ones that arrange the venues. They're the ones that arrange and put on and stage the event in connection with the dates that the PDC gives them as available. If they decide they want to put one in the UK and the PDC is not opposed to it, I could see it happening. But I think there's too many other markets that they want to reach first. And they probably should, especially now that there are tour card holders from France. There are Croatia that have never had it, Poland. So I think there's other events that'll go first.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more to add to what you've just said there, really. I think you look at the calendar the way it is, and there is predominantly a lot of the big events. They are held already here in the UK. And in terms of the Euro Tour, we're seeing nowadays a lot more countries and places there wanting to host Euro Tour events. We've had the Czech Republic, Hungary, we've got Switzerland coming in next year. And I think that is the way to go for the Euro Tour. It is to move into new territories, new countries, and give darts fans from other countries the chance to see these top players live playing in a professional tournament. I think if you are based in the UK, you've got plenty of chances to go and see those top players, whether that's on a Premier League night or the match play, the World Championship, the Grand Prix, which has come back to England over the last few years, the Grand Slam, the Masters, the list goes on. And I think really, I know Ireland is outside the UK, but I wouldn't be against perhaps putting on a Euro Tour in Ireland, given that the Grand Prix hasn't been in Dublin for a few years now. Is there venues that could hold a few thousand people for a weekend in Ireland? I think that would be a great addition to the Euro Tour. And if I was looking to introduce an event on the calendar closer to home, but not quite in the UK, I'd probably be looking at Ireland for me.
And one more question today. This one comes from Elliot. Which of the World Cup ever presents, Brendan Dolan of Northern Ireland, Minster Suljovic of Austria, Willie O'Connor of Ireland, and Simon Whitlock of Australia, do you expect to continue their streaks for the longest?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, if I go the opposite way first to begin with and say which of the 4 has got the biggest challenge to keep that ever-present streak going, then I think the obvious answer has got to be Brendan Dolan, because you look back to last weekend, it was the last weekend before the cut-off for this year's World Cup, and going into it, there was an outside chance that Brendan Dolan could miss out. If Josh Rock could have beaten Daryl Gurney in the final on Sunday, those two would have been the Northern Ireland team, and Brendan Dolan would have missed out. But I think you'd expect this time next year Josh Rock will be that Northern Ireland number one, and then it is going to be a battle between Daryl Gurney and Brendan Dolan to join him. But if I'm looking at the other three players, they're looking fairly safe at the moment. I think for them it's not a case of are they going to drop out the top two in terms of their country's rankings, but it's a battle to keep their number one spots. You've got Willie O'Connor, who's got Keane Barry. They're very close on the rankings at the moment for that Irish number one. And then you've got Steve Lennon, the Irish number three, currently in a fight to keep his tour card for next year. And similar with the Austria number one, Mensur Suljovic, he's held that for a very long time now. He's got quite a big lead on Roby John Rodriguez, but I think the main focus for that team is who's going to be number one, who's going to be number two. I don't think there's really a number three that's going to be close to them going into the next couple of years. And again, with Australia, the defending champions, Damon Hett, Simon Whitlock, every time we think that Simon Whitlock might be on the slide, he then gets himself back up the rankings. And we mentioned it recently, he's in contention again for the match play this summer, the Grand Prix later on in the year. And if you're in contention, let alone getting in those events, then I don't think there's a real danger of him losing his tour card. So if I had to pick one of them, I'll go with the youngest of the three then, because I think the ceiling on what they can still achieve, what they haven't achieved in the game, is probably a little bit high for Willie O'Connor. So if I'm going to pick one of those four, I'll go with Willie O'Connor.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Brendan Dolan, I think I agree. It seems unlikely that Josh Rock will not be in the side next year. I know it's unlikely that he would not be the top player in the side next year, which means it comes down to who between Brendan Dolan and Daryl Gurney stays in the side for 2024. Dolan's been streaky the last few years. Ever since we had him on the show, he was thinking about retiring, and then he went and won a title and then won another title, and been not a title regular since then, but has picked up he's won, I think, 4 titles over the last few years. But he's been streaky. He's been absolutely nowhere to be seen for months. And then he wins a title, has a few other deep runs. And that means he's no guarantee to be in all the televised events going forward. But Daryl Gurney's also been a bit streaky as well. And it comes down to which of those two does the best over the next year. Daryl Gurney absolutely could go and win a third major. He also could disappear off the face of the earth. I just don't know which of those two, but I think that means Daryl Gurney has to be the one. Brendan Dolan has to be the one who's most likely to drop out, because there's a clear and imminent threat to his spot in the squad for season 2024. But of the others, I don't think Whitlock's really in that conversation right now. I mean, there's plenty of very good Australian players. And if one of them comes over, I mean, obviously Corey Cadby, if he starts playing, could make the UK Open final again and suddenly jump off the rankings and catch Simon Whitlock after the World Championships. But beyond that, there's no immediate threat, and Whitlock's playing pretty well right now. Suljovic is not playing well right now. Willie O'Connor, who I thought was going to have a breakout year this year, is also not playing well right now. Mensur's outside the World Championship spots as things currently stand. O'Connor's currently in, but far from safe. And if he doesn't have a good back end of the year, he could see himself outside the World Championship spots. What does that mean? Well, it means nothing as far as having a tour card in 2024 is concerned. But missing the World Championships one year is puts you in a perilous situation for the following year. We've talked about Ian White. Ian White's had a very good year so far this year, but he still has work to do if he's going to even be on tour next year because of how missing the World Championship last year. Mervyn King's set to miss the World Championship this year, and it could actually mean he loses his tour card full stop. So missing a World Championships, just one, puts you in danger. And that's where Mensur Suljovic is currently putting himself, and it's where Willie O'Connor could as well. And that means, what does that mean for next year? That means they're fighting to save their tour card. And while Mensur Suljovic doesn't have someone who right now looks like he'd catch him even in 2024, Willie O'Connor actually does. Dylan Slevin, if he continues going the way he is, a bad season, missing the World Championships, that could mean next year that spot is in jeopardy. And even if it's not, for both of them, just staying on tour for 2025 is a question mark. And if that is a question mark, there are players who might be on tour that could be ahead of them. So I think both of them have work to do to keep their spots. It's not imminent. It's probably not going to be up until 2025 that either of them get caught. But if they miss the World Championships, it's definitely a question how much longer their ever-present status will last for. Anything else for this week?
Well, as always, we have to say a big thank you to our guests for joining us, to Alex and Jake for their time, and thanks to Peter Satira and the CDC for helping sort out both of those chats for us. Thank you to our sponsor, Dartwolf. If you want more Dynamite Darts content, head on over to dartwolf.tv. Give Dartwolf a follow on Twitter as well, at Dartwolf180. Thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you for the continued support of the show. It is much appreciated. Enjoy the darts this weekend. And there you go. I've got my catchphrase in early. That's all you've got to do. Make sure you enjoy the darts.
It's my birthday. I don't need to do any catchphrases. Catchphrases for the other days of the year. But thanks to our listeners. Thanks to Dartwolf. And I guess, thanks to our producer, Hannah. And thanks, as you mentioned, Peter Cetera for helping arrange the interviews. Everyone enjoy darts coming to the new world this week for the U.S. Darts Masters. Hopefully this is the year we finally see a North American player lift the trophy. That would be the ultimate birthday present, unless it's a Canadian, because who likes Canada? But we'll be back next week to recap that, look ahead to the World Cup, and continue looking ahead to the World Match Play. Until then, well, I'm not going to say it because, as I said, today's not about catchphrases.